Hi, my name is Tom and welcome to my channel Integral Views. So our new Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has announced a new immigration policy for the UK, and that's after looking at the Denmark model, so the Danish model, and meeting with counterparts in Denmark. So, and the Danish model is, kind of more strict, and this is their kind of new policy to try to control the massive illegal migration issue that we've got in the UK. So now, in a previous video that I made, I talked about the Fabian Society, and in that video I said that Shabana was not a Fabian Society member, but actually that's not true. And I think what's happened is that the sort of government, kind of documentation of affiliated groups was updated in October. And actually turns out, Shabana Mahmood is in fact a Fabian Society member, and probably I think has been for a long time. But why does this matter? Well, I spoke about this at length in a previous video of mine on my channel, and I recommend checking that out if you haven't already, to understand why it matters. But essentially, this is how the current Labour cabinet in the UK looks with regard to Fabian Society membership. So we have got 20 out of 21 cabinet members are members of the Fabian Society as well. So the wolves in sheep's clothing, and yep, that's the Fabian Society original logo. So these wolves in sheep's clothing are fully in control of us now, right? So that's like 95% of our cabinet are Fabian Society members. So you'd think, okay, so policy documents and Fabian Society ideas on immigration are probably quite important to understand, right? So, and what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to tie in some of the Fabian Society publications, some elements of them, to the most recent immigration policy that Shabana has announced. And I don't think that's been done before. So, and then I'm also going to talk about, some of the other elements in the Fabian Society kind of policy documents that we need to be aware of in case we see this creep into that kind of mode of operation, which would be disastrous from my perspective. So yes, all but one member of the current Labour cabinet in government are Fabian Society members. So nearly a full Fabian house that we've got going on there, right? Anyway, let's start this sort of look into this new immigration policy with a video of a reaction that Shabana gave in the House of Commons after it was announced. So a lot of people in the House of Commons were up in arms and outraged by this incredibly far-right Danish inspired policy. Anyway, this was Shabana's response in the House of Commons to a comment in question.
I have to say to the honourable gentleman, I wish I had the privilege of walking around this country and not seeing the division that the issue of migration and asylum system is creating across this country. Unlike him, unfortunately, I am the one that is regularly called a and told to go back home. It is I who knows through my personal experience and that of my constituents just how divisive the issue of asylum has become in our country. And I do say to him, I wish it were possible to say that there isn't a problem here, that there's nothing to see, and that it is all, in fact, just extremist right-wing talking points. But this system is broken, and it is incumbent on all members of Parliament to acknowledge how badly broken the system is and to make it a moral mission to fix this system so that it stops creating the division that we all see. And I do say to him, I do not think it is acceptable or appropriate for people in this place to not acknowledge the real experience of those who sit outside of this house. We are supposed to be in here to reflect that experience in this house, and I hope that he will approach the debates that we will no doubt have on all of these measures in that spirit.
Well, she certainly sounds like she means business. And the interesting thing I take out of this, and make of this what you will, okay? I'm not going to go into it now. In other videos in future I will. But like, the thing is, it's like, she really means it because she can see from her direct experience, you know, that there's this massive tension now along ethnic lines in the country, and that's true. You know, not everybody, okay, not everybody, but certainly it wasn't like this for a long time, and illegal migration is contributing hugely to that, plus very large amounts of sort of negative forms of mass migration as well, yeah? So, you know, but what she's talking about is from her experience. She really means it. She feels this, and she's saying this is the mission, yeah? So that's valid, and yeah, I mean, she seems like she means business. And it'll be remiss of me if I didn't point out something else that I noticed and felt watching that. I sort of thought, what would it be like, yeah, if somebody who has my kind of ethnicity, my background, you know, a man, Caucasian man, English through and through, you know, was standing there saying the same kind of stuff? Would it be interpreted differently? Could they do that? Would that be acceptable? You know, and so I sort of feel like there's an element there of, it's like, it seems to be kind of more okay to talk openly about this, you know, if you're an immigrant yourself of second generation or third generation. And so we've seen that as kind of a pattern. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of glide just across that, and you can make of that what you will. Now we're going to watch a second video of Shabana from the past where she was supporting amnesty. So she was supporting workers' rights for all people who are undocumented here illegally in the UK from the past.
No specific plans regarding amnesty for undocumented workers. Myself personally, as a Labour backbench Member of Parliament, I do support a general amnesty for all people who are already in the country, so they can regularise their status and start playing a full part in British society. But that will have to be alongside other documentation measures as well. That is not official Labour Party policy yet, but myself and a group of other Labour MPs are continuing to make the argument.
Well, that's quite a change of tune. That's quite a change of views, isn't it? Look, of course, I completely disagree with what she just said, but it seems like she disagrees with what she said in the past. And you know what the thing is? I'm not against people changing their views when they're wrong. It's a virtue for people to admit when they're wrong and change their views accordingly. We shouldn't be completely inflexible. So, you know, and the thing is, we need a lot of people in the UK to change their views. So I think when people do, let's welcome it, yeah? And Rupert Lowe, MP, leads the way on this kind of approach, as you can see in this tweet here. So this video is the 7th and final video in my 7-part series on illegal migration in the UK. In this video, I'm just talking about political policies with a very heavy focus on the new policy, the Denmark-style policy from Shabana Mahmood. And, you know, in the first video in this series, I spoke about my personal experience with a migrant hotel opening up 200 meters away from my house. Then I went on to talk about how there's likely 3 million illegal migrants in the UK right now, much more than people think. And I then spoke about how they likely cost us £30 billion every year. After that, I spoke about the legal framework. And then I showed how illegal migrants are likely to commit sexual offences an order of magnitude more frequently than native-born Brits. And then lastly, I spoke about how, you know, the ideology behind all of this and how it's kind of like liberalism, a mutated form of liberalism, more sort of aligned with relativism, actually. So let's get started. But before we do go into detail with regard to the new policy, let's talk about the way it's configured now without going into too much depth here. But essentially the way I view the illegal migration process and policy in the UK at the moment is that it's like a lottery ticket, right? So we basically get people from all over the world trying their luck, and eventually they will succeed or not. Even if they don't succeed, right? Even if their asylum claim is rejected, they still stay in the UK, often on welfare. And actually, if their refugee status is approved, they stay indefinitely, which is not the norm, okay, across the world. And basically then they're entitled to a funded life. A funded life right the way through to full pension and all of that kind of stuff, all of the healthcare and everything for the UK. So why not try your luck, right? Now, a really interesting thing I want to point out here, because we focus a lot on small boats. And in this video series so far, I've explained how we stop checking visa overstayers, right? So we stop checking people who get a visa to come here and how many leave and how many stay. We just stop checking in 2020 because, yeah. So here are the stats. So of 111,800 who have claimed asylum here this year, right, up to 2025, 39%, 43,600 arrived in small boats, and that's what we focus so much on, right? But a further 37%, 41,100 arrived first via legal means. Okay. So think about this for a sec. So we're talking about people basically coming in by planes, because what else they can do? Swim. Now I guess some come in on trains as well, and some on like bigger boats or in back of lorries and that kind of stuff. Anyway, but she's talking about legal means, so that'll be trains and planes. Okay, so they come here on whatever kind of visa, yeah, student visa, tourist visa, whatever it is, make an asylum claim, right? Now think about this. Why wouldn't everybody just do that? Why wouldn't you just get a plane ticket? Why would you pay a gang to smuggle you thousands of pounds, yeah, across in a dinghy at great risk? Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just get a plane ticket? We don't even check visa overstayers, and you can just claim asylum once you're here. Well, when you do get a plane ticket and you use your passport, then there's a record of you, isn't there, in the system? And so then our system will have some information about you. So if you don't want the system to have any information about you whatsoever, you want to be able to say whatever you make up, yeah, whatever you want to say, get on a boat, come over, and then you can make up whatever you want to make up. Oh, and by the way, if you're successful with your lottery ticket, right, your asylum claim, then it not only entitles you, so that'll often be based on a subjective interview because there's no other evidence to base the analysis on of whether your claim is valid or not, just sort of whatever you say, you know, if you say the right things, right? But yeah, if you're successful, it doesn't just entitle you to that lifelong funded situation in the United Kingdom, but it also entitles your family, yeah? So you can then bring your family as well. A fully broken system. All right, so this new policy, a series of policies basically, is outlined in this policy paper, Restoring Order and Control, a statement on the government's asylum and returns policy. And lucky us, in the introduction, we got a few comments from Right Honourable Sir Keir Starmer, KBC, KC MP, okay, our Prime Minister. And he said something there, this is just a snippet, okay, he said a bunch of stuff, but anyway. The principle that people genuinely fleeing danger and persecution should be welcomed is one this government will always defend, an expression of the UK's values in action. Okay, so he's very clear. So anybody fleeing danger will always be protected in the United Kingdom. But then, devil's in the detail, isn't it? What do you mean by danger? That's a creeping term in human rights law. Danger, you know, if standards aren't quite right, you haven't got the right chicken nuggets, all that kind of stuff. It's like, what do you actually really mean by that? And how do you prove it? And then also in the introduction, we got a couple of comments from Shabana, but I just pulled out some snippets again, right? So this first one, this statement sets out an entirely new asylum model for this country. Just like in Denmark, very heavy on Denmark, by the way, refugee status becomes temporary, lasting only until a refugee can safely return home. Well, shouldn't that always have been the way that it is, of course? You know, so we had this de facto kind of a policy of you're a refugee and then you just have full rights and you're a refugee, you're here forever and that's it. And actually this document does change that to some extent, we'll see later. And then another thing I wanted to point out quick in her opening introduction, open up new capped routes for refugees for whom this country will be the first safe haven they encounter. We will make community sponsorship the norm, so we know that the pace and scale of change does not exceed what a local area is willing to accept. And this is really important, and we're going to touch on it later on in this video. But for now, what I want to say about it is just really notice how she says the first safe haven they encounter. So meaning they're not coming from France, they're coming direct, right? They're coming here directly in a safe and approved legal route then, yeah? And also she's talking a lot about community sponsorship. So that's some Fabian stuff right there. Now, we're not going to go through the whole document. Yeah, I've just pulled some pieces out. So through the video, you'll get basically the understanding you need. You can go and read the document if you want it full. Actually, I recommend it if you've got time. Yeah, but if not, anyway, watch this. So part 1, reducing arrivals. There's 3 parts we're going to look at. This is the first one, right? And it starts by saying a new core protection offer for refugees. This statement sets out a new approach to refugee protection in the UK, which marks a significant change in direction, away from an assumption of offering permanent protection and towards a more basic and temporary protection, which we will call core protection. For people who claim asylum and are granted protection in the UK, we will introduce a new regime that provides support for refugees that's entirely in accordance with our international obligations but does not exceed them. That's an interesting statement. So basically what they're doing, what this whole thing is they're trying to work around, they're trying to work with the ECHR, they're trying to work within it, disapply it maybe a little bit, yeah, but kind of like, what can we get away with when we're pushing at the edges of this kind of corner that we've backed ourselves into with this international law? Yeah, so what can we get away with, basically? My feeling on it is probably not very much, as I think we're about to find out. Yeah, but another thing that's important there, right, is that it's like we're really focusing more on temporary refugee status, and that's after asylum claims are successful. Yeah, then refugee status is temporary. And in line with that, we've got this next little comment. So shortened leave to remain. Currently, refugees in the UK receive a 5-year initial period of leave. Just stop there for a sec. 5-year initial period of leave. So that basically means that it brings them all the way up to indefinite leave to remain. Yeah, so it basically moves into indefinite leave to remain, and then that moves into citizenship, and that's why it's just you get asylum and then that's it, that's your golden ticket, you're staying there for good. Yeah, so going on, right, in the future this will be reduced significantly. Refugees will instead receive 30 months of leave to remain, which can only be renewed if they are still considered in need of protection. Where protection is no longer needed, the person will become liable for removal from the UK. And this is really important, yeah, because the devil is in the detail. What do you mean by when they're basically safe, yeah, when protection is no longer needed? Because depending on how you define that, people could potentially never, be sort of forced to leave or leave voluntarily, or lose that right to stay. So effectively, it's like, how do you define whether it's safe for them to leave? And often that is just the most spurious kind of reasons. Whilst I'm here, I'm just going to say something that I've been thinking about, and I need to research this a little bit better myself before I kind of put it forward as a recommendation. But basically, I've been thinking, why wouldn't you just change how we determine what's safe and what's not safe? Yeah, I bet that's probably written down in the ECHR or somewhere in detail. But effectively, you could have this approach where, to get around all these things, so you don't have to leave the ECHR and maybe save yourself some legal pain, you just put legislation in that says, well, we deem basically anything safe, effectively, unless it's, move the bar really, really, really high. So then, that would kind of deal with a lot of the legal. I don't know, it's just an idea, and I thought I'd mention it while I'm at it. Okay, so moving on, a longer path to settlement. In the future, there will be no path to indefinite settled status in the UK on core protection until a refugee has spent 20 years in the country, an increase on the current 5 years. Settlement requirements will be considered in an upcoming consultation on earned settlement, covering both legal and illegal migrants. Now, what's really interesting about this part is that we had this Boris wave, yeah? So we had loads of people coming to the UK under Boris Johnson. I think in around 2020, 2021, 2022, we had loads and loads of people coming here, when we refer to this as the Boris wave. And soon they will reach that kind of threshold where they would historically have qualified for indefinite leave to remain. And the government knows, as I know, that they are not net contributors to the UK finances. They are a net cost, a very significant net cost. It's not to say that they're not working. Often they are working, and often a lot of the work that they're doing is actually important. The question is, are there other people in society who could be doing that work that aren't doing it, right? But they know that if we grant indefinite leave to remain and then that moves them into citizenship, it is completely unaffordable for the United Kingdom. It raises other questions like, how do we afford the care sector long term? We haven't really solved that problem. We've just kind of put a little plaster on it for a short period of time. But what we've done is unaffordable, right? So something had to be done. So that's why she says legal and illegal migrants, because they're changing the whole process around indefinite leave to remain. Okay, the next bit, protection, work and study visa routes. The government does not believe that refugees should remain on core protection long term. And core protection is what she referred to initially, what they referred to initially in this document. I'm saying it as if she's written this whole thing herself. This is from the Home Office, yeah, but it's led by Shabana. For some reason, whenever I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's Shabana, right? Anyway, it doesn't matter. So we want to encourage refugees to integrate more fully into the communities, providing them sanctuary. Okay, so and basically this is some Fabian stuff really. So we'll see later in the Fabian Society publications that they're so big on this stuff, which is like the problem really is they're not integrating and working. The problem is that they're just not allowed to work. So we need to give them all the right to work. And this is kind of along those lines, but not really, yeah. Anyway, so work and study. So then to address this, we will encourage refugees to switch out of the core protection route wherever possible. We will introduce a new in-country protection work and study route. A person granted protection will be eligible to apply to move into this route if they obtain employment or commence study at an appropriate level to pay a fee. Once on this route, they will become eligible to earn settlement sooner than they would under a core protection alone, right? So it's like, I think basically what's happening here is that the government has recognised that I think it's 66% of people, even after they have a successful asylum claim, they remain on universal credit. So it's that lottery ticket of, oh, I won the lottery, I'm in social housing, I haven't got that much money, but I'm on universal credit, I've got healthcare, everything I need actually, I don't really need that much. So this is all good for me, just forever, yeah, I'll just sit in parks and stuff, you know what I mean? So this is a recognition of that. Yeah, this is a recognition of that problem that we've got. And so they're saying like, well, if you then go and study and work, then you're going to earn your citizenship faster. And then new requirements on family reunion. Under core protection, there will be no automatic right to family reunion. That's a big deal. Because remember what I said before, that if your lottery ticket pays off, yeah, your asylum claim, then basically you have the right to bring family members. Like, I know it's not particularly perfect to be saying lottery ticket all the time, but it does apply to a lot of people, not to everybody. Okay, don't get me wrong. So those who successfully move off core protection and enter a work and study visa route could become eligible to sponsor family members to come to the UK. So if they move into that work and study route, then they could become sponsors basically for their family, so they can bring their family over then. The same conditions may apply as for other legal migrants and UK citizens. You know what I just said about lottery tickets? It made me want to just clarify, okay? Because the reality is the United Kingdom has a much higher standard of living than most of the world, yeah? So we have built this high trust society largely, okay, over hundreds of years. And, effectively the United Kingdom is a better place to live than much of the world in many, many different ways, okay? And so a lot of the world wants to come here, don't they? Obviously. So I mean, like hundreds of millions of people want to come here or would prefer to be here. So I think that's effectively our entire asylum system is being taken advantage of. I think that, of course, there are situations where, we would want to provide temporary protection for people. But the way that it's been gamed and industrialized is absolutely out of control. And just generally, my opinion is, we surely can't just take millions of people from around the world, from very different cultures, continuously, indefinitely, yeah, and have them basically come here and be here forever. It doesn't make any sense. It's completely unworkable. So I think a much better approach, just generally, to finish off this little quick segment, a much better approach generally as a philosophy is, well, why don't we build our economy into a powerhouse and then actually help improve those societies where they are? Yeah, why don't we help improve those societies with no strings attached infrastructure projects and things like that? But we have to first stop wrecking our own economy. This next bit's kind of interesting. Reduced right to public funds. The government expects those who are arriving or returning to the UK to seek work. To encourage this, we are now exploring a change of taxpayer-funded benefits to prioritise access for those who are making an economic contribution to the UK. This could see additional criteria that migrants have to meet to receive benefits and actions they need to take in order not to lose them. A consultation on this question will take place in 2026. And this is kind of interesting, right? Because it's kind of echoing some of Reform's, the Reform Party's statements with regard to removing welfare from foreign nationals. It's completely ridiculous to think they have people coming from outside of the UK living here and then living on benefits at taxpayers' expense. So they're coming from other countries and then we're funding them here. Why? Why would we do that? And this next bit's been in the news a little bit. Contributions mechanism. In addition, we will require individuals to contribute toward the cost of their asylum support where they have some assets or income, but not enough to support themselves independently. We'll also take action to recover support costs in scenarios where any assets are not convertible into cash or declared at the point that asylum support is initially provided but become convertible, blah blah blah, whatever. Okay, so, and this has been in the news, yeah, people saying, oh, they're confiscating the jewelry and like assets of poor people coming here. And I think, yeah, like, why would the taxpayer fund all this stuff if people are coming here with assets and they can fund some of it themselves? Obviously no. And then they made this statement around moving out of hotels, and we kind of know about this, yeah. So like they've committed to moving away from the use of hotels for illegal migrants here in the UK. And we know what this means, using social housing. Yeah, but actually they're kind of focusing a little bit more now, right, on using these like army camps and like facilities, large facilities that people would be in. The thing is that they're not stuck there, like, they still go out into communities and stuff, yeah. But basically, what do I think about it? I think hotels are absolutely insane and ridiculous. I think HMOs are absolutely insane and ridiculous. Social housing is insane and ridiculous, right? Because they're jumping up the ladder ahead of people who've been here contributing, working for generations. It's insane, including veterans. Yeah, so, but at some point, this, it's the whole thing. Basically, there's no good answer. That's my opinion, which is why my view overall is shut the whole thing down. It's broken. All right, this next bit is a little bit of credit where it's due. I like to be balanced, yeah? So, increased enforcement. So under this government, there has already been a significant crackdown on illegal working, raising enforcement activity to the highest level in recorded history. In the year ending September 2025, 11,000 raids were carried out by immigration enforcement. And by June 2025, over 2,100 civil penalties were issued to employers found to have hired illegal workers, totaling over £117 million. Over 1,000 foreign nationals encountered on these operations have since been removed from the country. 1,000. So 1,000 people gone. Now, I predict there's 3 million illegal migrants here. You've done 1,000. Okay. All right. I'll look, credit where it's due. Right? It's the best we've ever done. It's still pathetic. It's nowhere near where we need to be. But credit where it's due. It's an improvement. Okay. Something that we can build on. Building blocks, okay, at least to some extent, yeah. But basically, this is the tip of the iceberg. There is a huge, massive problem going on here, okay, just across the country. It is a huge industry, a massive economic drain, to the extent that people have, just generally in society, no real understanding of how badly this impacts our country. So we need to ramp this up. You can start by timesing that by what, like 10, and then times it by 100, like, and then you're getting somewhere, yeah. Okay, and now a controversial bit. She says, it's not Shabana writing all this, okay? It's the Home Office. So they say introduction of digital ID. The government has delivered a rollout of e-visas as a quick and efficient means for employers to check the rights and status of foreign nationals seeking to work. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, so basically what she's saying is that we're going to use digital ID. It's a justification. It's going to help us crack down on illegal working. But, they've already got these e-visas, and people who are not working illegally, who are working illegally, they're just going to avoid this whole system, They're unscrupulous. They're going to find ways around it. All this is going to do is impact people who are working legally. I mean, surely, yeah? So I think, look, generally, I really get this feeling. Look, first of all, I know that we have lost control of the United Kingdom. So we don't know who's here, and there's huge amount of money in sort of the economy that we don't know that's taking place. Taxes are being paid. Huge amounts of money are leaving the country through Western Union, and many other means. Yeah. And so there's a loss of control. And so I can understand why they go, well, if we just implement this thing where we just have complete control of everything and we can see absolutely everything, then, it'll be good. Yeah. But okay, how about first you start checking in the country, right? Like who overstays their visas? Maybe that will be something to do that first. And there are other approaches, like you have to absolutely expand massively these immigration enforcement teams to go and check businesses. Do mandatory checking and go into detail. So I think that we have so many people working in the government, tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands. Like the public sector is absolutely massive. It's all about what are your priorities, okay? And so I think that this needs to become a much bigger priority. And the whole digital ID thing, if there was huge trust in the government, and the government hadn't gone against the wishes of the citizens and it was aligned with what the citizens actually wanted, then maybe we could have that conversation. But given that the government has done exactly the opposite of what the citizens have wanted for a generation at least, maybe multiple generations, then that's kind of off the table. All right, now we're on to part two. Part two is much shorter and part three is even shorter, okay? So don't worry, they're not all as long as part one. Part two, increasing removals. So, removing failed asylum seekers. In mid-2023, there were more than 41,000 asylum claims that had been rejected, but the claimants remained in the UK. There are some cases in which this is unavoidable, okay? And what they're talking about here, they say following the principle of non-refoulement, we won't send people back to a country where they face torture or threats to life. But the reality is that it's not just about whether they're facing threats to their life and torture. Yeah, it's been really, really expanded. And the reality is that for the UK, our definition of and our standard of living is completely different to in many other countries. Anyway, it's like moving goalposts, and that is based on pre-existing international law. And if you want to know more about it, go watch my video in this series on the legal framework. All right, this next bit of text I won't read through in full, but basically just bits of it. So families who have one or more children under the age of 18, at the point they were refused asylum, right, continue to receive support until the youngest child turns 18. And what this basically amounts to is if you come here and let's say you've got kids, right, and you claim asylum, but it's rejected because it's a fraudulent claim, found to be fraudulent, yeah? Well, then we're just going to continue providing you support, and that means taxpayer-funded support in terms of housing, yeah, social housing and welfare, etc., like paying for your life, healthcare, everything, okay? Until that child turns 18. So imagine that. It's if you have a young child, you get to the UK, you're golden, okay? Doesn't matter if your asylum claim is rejected. So that's just clearly a completely ridiculous situation. And so that's something that they're looking to change in this new policy. And so on a comment on that, it says, therefore, as part of the aforementioned consultation, we'll consult on commencing measures in the 2016 Immigration Act, which allow us to remove support from families who do not have a genuine obstacle to leaving the country. And then just this little bit on return hubs. We will continue to explore the use of return hubs, which are safe third countries that failed asylum seekers can be sent to instead of their country of origin. Negotiations with a number of countries are ongoing. So essentially it's like you fail in your asylum claim and then we send you to another country instead of you staying here. And this next bit's really interesting, right? So visa penalties. We expect all countries to take back their citizens who have no right to be in the UK. This includes providing travel documents within a reasonable time period, while many countries are fully cooperative with returns arrangements. Others delay doing so for months or even years. Some fail to cooperate at all. Okay, moving on. So expanding returns agreements. We will work bilaterally with countries on returns and where necessary sign formal agreements to underpin cooperation. In August 2025, we signed a new agreement with Iraq to establish formal processes to swiftly return those with no legal right to be in the UK. So again, it's like credit where it's due, yeah? That's a really important thing because we get a lot of people coming here from Iraq. So that's an important thing. Well done, okay? Kudos. In October 2025, we announced a new agreement with Vietnam that will streamline our returns process and reduce redocumentation timescales. For those countries that refuse to comply, we must take action. Imposing visa penalties. We will act against countries who fail to cooperate with the return of their citizens, including through imposing visa penalties as provided for in Section 72 of the Nationalities and Borders, blah, blah, blah. We could include suspending or granting of entry clearance for nationals of a country until it takes back citizens who are in the UK illegally. And then it says, the imposition of visa penalties on one country will send a message to all. I don't know, will it? Maybe. Don't know. The UK will always be open to talented people willing to contribute to this country. We will not, however, be willing to keep open legal routes when countries do not cooperate on returns. And this is where it gets controversial, okay? So this was debated in Parliament on the 17th of November 2025, okay? And within that, so I looked at the transcript of that, and Shabana said, I can announce that we have told Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Namibia that if they do not comply with international rules and norms, we will impose visa penalties on them. What? Wait, what? Angola, Namibia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. What? Why did you choose them? That seems a bit weird. Like, they're not in any of the top lists for people coming here illegally that I'm aware of. Not at all. So let's look at what these countries have in common, okay? Now, before I do this, I'm not making any accusations. This is just an observation, okay? So one thing that they all have in common is they're all very heavily Christian countries. Angola, 92% Christian, predominantly Roman Catholic and Protestant. Namibia, 97% Christian, mostly Lutheran and other Protestant denominations. Democratic Republic of Congo, 95% Christian, strong Catholic majority plus significant Protestant and revival churches. So yeah, they have that in common. And here's a chart that shows the countries that people claimed asylum from in the UK, yeah? So we got Bangladesh, okay, first, then Eritrea, India, Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, Sudan, Syria, Vietnam. Now, the majority of these are predominantly Muslim countries. Majority Muslim countries, Bangladesh, Eritrea is, Iran is, Iraq is, Pakistan is, Sudan is, Syria is, Vietnam's not. India is an interesting one, yeah? Because you know what I think about those numbers? I think that essentially in India you've got a very heavily kind of conservative Hindu government, and I think that, you know, they do to some extent kind of, you could say, discriminate against Muslims to some extent, yeah? So they sort of have these things that prevent them from becoming citizens, or to some extent, so they have some policies, right? And I think people coming from India are likely Muslims. That's what I think, from India. I can't prove it, I don't know, nobody actually really knows, no one has that data. But it's just a thought that I had, it's possible. And quickly, let's just look, with it in mind that they're basically called out Namibia, right, Angola, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Let's have a look at who the countries that basically contribute the largest amount of small boat arrivals, illegal migrants into the UK. Afghanistan, yeah, that's an Islamic country. Eritrea, that's an Islamic country. Iran, same. Syria, same. Sudan, same. And you can go down the list. This is partial, yeah. But essentially, there is that similarity. So it does stand out. It is a little bit weird, yeah, that those three that they've mentioned are Christian countries. I'm not saying that's on purpose. I actually personally don't think that that's on purpose. But there's something weird. There's something. Okay, what it is? Bad optics. The optics are all wrong. Maybe I'm naive, yeah, for thinking that's not intentional. I don't know what to think. It's like, why would you choose them? I don't know. Why? It's bizarre. All right, you remember I said that there were the Fabian Society publications? So this is where those entered the scene, okay? Lawful and Fair, this is a Fabian Society document I spoke about in great detail in a video that's this one that's on my channel, right? So in the government's policy document they just released, they talk about the French deal, yeah? So the deal with France, the one in, one out, and then they come back, and then they go out, and they come back, and they come back, yeah. Never ending, okay? Merry-go-round. Anyway, so they talk about that. But the thing is that, like, that plan was actually outlined to some extent, yeah, within that Fabian Society document, and that was what the government basically had in their mind, in my opinion, given that they're all basically Fabian Society members. In that Fabian Society document says, we need a new plan of tackling spontaneous high-risk maritime arrivals based on partnership with France and the EU. Okay, so they were thinking along these lines, yeah? And next up is legal reform. So this is quite complicated stuff, and you can go and look into it. This video is getting really, really long as it is. So essentially, I'm just going to sort of gloss over it, right? So they talk a lot about Article 8 in the ECHR and how it blocks us from actually, getting rid of people here who are here illegally with failed asylum claims. It talks about how 86% of people who raised rights-based applications whilst in detention, awaiting removal, were released. Yeah, so it's just ridiculous. So they're essentially, they said, we will limit the application of Article 8 on asylum and immigration cases. Again, if you want to know more about it, go and have a look at this full document. Effectively, this is going to be really interesting, yeah, because they think that what they can do is they can sort of disapply Article 8 to certain people because it's really harming our society effectively. So they say on balance, it's actually within the rules of the ECHR that we can do that. So we'll see how that goes in the House of Commons. And now we're on to part 3, the final part. Safe and legal routes. And this is really, really one to watch. This is a really interesting area. We really have to watch this carefully, okay? So they're basically talking about, in this statement here, I won't read through the whole thing, but they're saying that we have a history, right, of providing safe and legal like refugee status for people who are fleeing like the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and then the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, and then what was happening in Hong Kong. So we have a history of intervening and having these safe and legal routes for basically bringing refugees to the UK. And a lot of people are saying that what they're going to do is they're going to industrialize this and they're going to expand it. They're going to make safe and legal routes huge, yeah? So they're basically just, and actually the Fabian Society document calls for that, and we'll go through that in a sec, okay? But, so they say it's vital that we maintain capped routes into the UK for those that need sanctuary, are formally referred to for resettlement. That is the right way for refugees to enter the UK and benefit from our protection. Safe and legal routes with full security checks and controls have provided a lifeline to some of the world's most vulnerable people. Anyway, moving on. And now I'm going to show a direct comparison between the Fabian Society, what the Fabian Society document says, and what's said in the government document. So the government document says safe havens, we will make community sponsorship the norm, so we know that the pace and scale of change does not exceed what a local area is willing to accept. And the Fabian Society document talks a hell of a lot about that, the community welcome, community support. We argue below for a new community welcome route that will provide communities with agency to sponsor people directly, which could further enhance community voice. And that's from the Fabian Society document, Lawful and Fair. And the government's policy talks about this kind of at a bit of length, yeah? They go on about it a bit, they're quite big on it. We will continue to do this with a particular focus on refugee sponsorship. The immigration white paper set out that the refugee sponsorship would become the framework for the UK, for most of the UK government's refugee settlement efforts. There is emerging evidence from around the world that sponsorship can lead to better integration outcomes and at lower cost compared to government-supported models of resettlement. The new model will give greater say to communities and support refugees as they settle, become self-sufficient and contribute to their local areas. This new model will be based on local capacity to support refugees, and arrival numbers will be tightly controlled by the government. It will not affect our existing commitments. Okay, this is really something we've got to focus on, something we've really got to look at, okay, keep an eye on very, very closely, because, you know, this could absolutely get out of control. And look, if they are really thinking along the Fabian Society lines, then it's very worrying, because, you know, a lot of those documents, well, look, we're going to go through it. So from the Fabian Society document, it says, in addition, the UK should create a single community welcome route to enable communities to sponsor refugees, right? And that's what the government document said, sponsorship of refugees. The UK Refugee Service would be responsible for administering a single uncapped additional sponsorship route. So they say uncapped sponsorship route, right? Basically administered by this UK Refugee Service. And by the way, that UK Refugee Service that they refer to is staffed by 1,000 people in the United Kingdom. So they want to industrialise it through these legal and safe routes. That's what the Fabian Society were calling for. The community welcome route would allow citizen groups, including faith, charity and community groups, as well as universities and employers, to sponsor refugees, building on existing schemes, including the Community Sponsorship Scheme and the Homes for Ukraine scheme, but not restricted to any particular nationality. So it would be basically applying that same scheme. And just as a reminder, this is all from that Fabian Society document, and our cabinet are all Fabian Society members, and we're starting to get some echoes right through into the government policy documents. Okay, so further they say, this is from the Fabian Society, a community-based welcome strategy would fit and move in lockstep with a new national refugee policy. For example, requiring a minimum level of refugee resettlement in all local authorities. That's just crazy. And a single community welcome sponsorship scheme for all nationalities as outlined above, but encompassing all new arrivals. Now, I have to point out here that the Fabian Society document publication and the government policy is different in many critical ways, okay? But there are some similarities in some areas, okay? And one of the ways that it's different is in this way. So the government's document says, the process will begin with the Home Secretary setting an annual cap on the number of arrivals that will be accepted through safe and legal routes. This will be based on the capacity and ability for communities to welcome refugees. We will prioritise global resettlement, particularly individuals identified by referral partners such as the UNHCR. Communities and institutions in the UK will have far greater say over who the UK supports. But it's like the devil's in the detail again. Like, what's the cap? How high is the cap? How does the cap differ for different countries? Is this all in addition, like the safe and legal route people in addition to those coming illegally? You know, so are you just building whole new routes that are legal? You know, what's going on here? And just to show, you know, how far that Fabian Society document went, quick, I'll go through a few things. I did mention this before. So they basically call for 1,000 trained senior refugee and asylum decision-making staff with clear career paths, you know, going off into the future to industrialise this whole thing. Policy should catalyse and accelerate the process of migrants becoming us, joining our democracy, as well as equal citizens with equal rights as quickly as possible. So they call for all of this, like, speeding up of bringing people in legally, processing with 1,000 staff, and then making them citizens as quickly as possible. Then they also say a new immigration rule offering the right to work for any asylum seeker in the UK, and that's something we have to look out for. Yeah, through this process, do they start to creep into this right for work thing? Like, is that study and work thing where you got the core, remember you got the core thing, the core, I can't remember, it's like called core protection or something like that. And then they talk about the study and work thing as well. This is what the government's policy is talking about. Well, are we starting to creep into that? Yeah, now actually you can just work, which is what the Fabian Society that they're all members of has been calling for. We will see. The UK Refugee Service would be responsible for administering a single uncapped additional sponsorship route. I said that before. Difference with the government's policy document is that it's capped. But where are those caps set? How high are they? Is it essentially uncapped because you set them so high? We'll see. And then in this statement they say including mandated acceptance of some refugees. And this bit's really interesting because I bet you this is going to apply. Mark my words, yeah? I bet. I'll make a bet with you right now, okay? So, right, look at this. The immediate implementation of a new online portal that simplifies and improves the paper-based questionnaire sent to asylum applicants from Afghanistan, Eritrea, Libya, Syria and Yemen in early 2023 for any nationality with high acceptance rates and waiting more than 50 days for a decision. So, yeah, I bet they do this. So I bet when they say safe and legal routes, they make it possible for you to apply it online from anywhere in the world, and then you have it all pre-approved and everything, and then you come and I bet they then move straight into work, yeah, or whatever. So I bet they're going to do that. I bet they will. We'll see. And then the Fabian Society document also says basically making as many migrants, and they mean legal and illegal, as many migrants as possible supported to integrate on a path to citizenship. All right, so that ends my review of the document, the policy, okay? Now, the thing is, so this is going to have to go through the House of Commons. Certain elements of it are, certain elements of it we already have the right to do. And you know what I predict? I think that Labour MPs are just not going to have it, yeah? Like they didn't have the small reduction of unaffordable benefits, okay? So it's going to cause an issue, right? And Kemi Badenoch has already said that she would provide the votes, necessary alongside Labour in certain conditions. Okay, so maybe the Conservatives will sort of partner with Labour to get this through. We will see. But even if it does get through, yeah, I then predict that our activist judges will find some way of making it unworkable. They'll find some way of undermining it. But this is really the final roll of the dice. This is the last roll of the dice for this human rights system overall before it gets completely obliterated. So good luck. All right, now my opinion on this whole situation, this whole policy. Right, I think it's an improvement, right? I think overall it's an improvement. But it could go very, very wrong because those safe and legal routes could just be completely expanded and abused because we're introducing new mechanisms here. And I'm not convinced that this will actually end up really solving the existing issues that we've got. I think that there'll be ways that are found around that. So we might still have that problem. It might even get worse. And then we might introduce a whole new problem with these safe and legal routes as well. So, we're going to see, aren't we? Could potentially get really a lot worse. But yeah, time will tell. Potentially it could maybe prevent some damage before we can actually solve this issue properly and vote in, a government that will do something about this properly and leave the ECHR and do what's actually necessary. Overall, this was like a really professionally produced policy document. There were loads of footnotes, links to data sets. It was really well done. And Shabana just took on the role on September the 5th. And I think she's clearly like a remarkably intelligent and kind of highly productive individual, hardworking and impressive person, I think, overall. And overall, I would say my view as we stand right now, and maybe I'm naive, I might be proven wrong, but I would think, once Shabana's done with this and sorted this area out, assuming that she doesn't completely mess up with these safe and legal routes, yeah, then, maybe she could, if she does, she could replace Keir Starmer, because he's got to go, hasn't he? Overall, I support Shabana, yeah? I want her to solve the issue. I want us to make progress. Doesn't matter who does it, which party they're from, I want them to be successful. So I hope she is, but I really have significant doubts. We have got to watch the rights to work. If we're going to see this creep and the rights to work, we've got to watch those safe and legal routes. We've got to watch these online portals being introduced where people can apply from anywhere in the world. What do we mean by this community, sponsorship, where businesses, churches, charities, activist charities could sponsor people to come in. You know, what does this, I've got a bad feeling about that. But look, time will tell you. In future on my channel, I'm going to go through all the different political parties and their policies in detail. But for now, let's just do a really high level view, yeah? Okay, so the Labour Party, they're basically implementing this kind of Denmark plan, but with some major caveats, yeah, that I'm really not comfortable with. We'll just have to see how that plays out. The Conservatives, they are saying they want to leave the ECHR. They're basically committing to 750,000 deportations, which is kind of more like it. It's got to go even higher than that, but that's like 150,000 a year. That's what they're saying. They'll have this removals force designed to deport 150,000 people a year. So kind of like, I guess, ICE style. I don't know, we'll see, like ICE ICE in America. And then reform, yeah. Reform have said they'll leave the ECHR. Another one that says they'll leave the ECHR. 650,000 deportations per year, less than the, not per year, sorry, in total over their government, 650,000, less than the Conservatives. Those two are kind of, you know, they're trying to up each other on that. But also, you know, the Reform have gone very big on removal of welfare for foreign nationals as well. And then we got the lunatics out in the Green Party who hate facing reality whatsoever and live in Narnia. And they want open borders. So they're saying rights to work for illegal migrants and right to vote for illegal migrants based on residency and no ID requirements. Basically, they just don't want borders at all. That's a Green Party position. I think they're completely nuts. And my general opinions on the asylum system and what I would like to see. So, you know, I think we should end the asylum system altogether right now. So it's clearly open to manipulation. And when we start to move around and play with these things and these concepts and we're not clear, yeah, then things get manipulated. I think we should be absolutely clear. It should be no asylum whatsoever. And then if we're going to grant asylum for a specific conflict at a specific time, there should be a referendum across the country, and what the citizens of that country say, only citizens, what the citizens say goes, okay, with a cap number, and that's then the full cap and that's it. And it's also temporary. I think the UK has done far more than its fair share of taking in refugees. It's more than is even reasonable. I think clearly it's changed our society massively. It's basically breaking the whole country, and you can see it in our economic data. I'll show that increasingly on my channel. I think it's better for us morally to build up a strong economy and then to help the world. We went through the Industrial Revolution and then we delivered to the world living standard improvements and inventions and innovations like vaccines, antiseptic, antibiotics, you name it, right? You name it. The modern world, steam engines, a whole load of stuff, okay? So effectively, you know, I sort of feel like we should focus on our economy. When that starts to fail, it's not a moral good, right? And then once we're in a position of strength, we can help countries more. And I think then we would do no strings attached, not loans, yeah? We'd actually develop infrastructure projects in these countries that really need it. Help people where they are, help them in their own countries. Alright, so this is a long video, longer than I thought it was going to be. But this is the final installment in my 7-part video on illegal migration. But actually, this is just the beginning. So I wanted to get this, you know, foundational series of videos in place that I can refer people back to. So it's everything all kind of together, all the little pieces, right? And then I'm going to take it from there. So I want to talk about legal migration. I want to talk about this ethno-nationalist movement. What's the difference between that and civic nationals? I want to talk about cultural, all sorts of stuff. I have amassed a massive list of things that I'm going to go through. So this is the beginning. And I'm going to focus on illegal migration a lot more in the future as well, in a lot more detail. But this is like the foundational thing, the launch pad, okay? And I want to say a massive thank you to everybody who's commented, who's liked, who's engaged, who's subscribed. Thank you so much. It's actually inspired me to keep going. So thank you so much. It makes a really big difference. I've read thousands of comments. And, you know, even thank you to all of those people who commented referring to me as some kind of extremist, woke, snowflake liberal. So yeah, thanks to you guys too, who wrongly thought that. But yeah, so yeah, it has inspired me to keep going, all of these comments and engagement, so thanks. So look, as usual, if you like this video, please give it a like. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it if you think my videos are entertaining or informative. And yeah, so until next time, thanks so much for watching. Cheers.